Everybody, welcome out to Facebook Live here at Ozark Holistic Center. I am Dr. Rory Quinn. This is
Dr. Ricci, Dr. Gabe,
whichever. So today we wanted to go into, which is our topic for the week, actually gallbladder and gallbladder cleansing. That was actually a suggestion from somebody last week, which we really appreciate them sending that over. Last week we tried doing one on adrenal fatigue. We will actually be doing that the following week or next Wednesday, just because we ran it last week and apparently Facebook was down, so the video didn't go through. So we'll be doing that next week. But this week we're going to be talking about gallbladder cleansing, and it's kind of the often talked about, but I think under way more important than people even realize organ of the body. So the gallbladder surgery actually is the #1 surgery in America. More people get it removed and go through that process than any other surgery. So it's something that a lot of people have an issue with and a problem with. It's something I've seen here in the office for years. Honestly, since I started, I probably had, I would say honestly, I probably averaged 4 to maybe 6 people a month coming in, and we realized through the process of applied kinesiology and muscle testing and realizing what they're actually dealing with is a gallbladder issue and gallbladder problem. So a couple of the typical just symptoms of it. I'm gonna hit the symptoms. We're going to symptoms of it to kind of give you an idea of might you be experiencing it, might you be going through that. We're going to go through some of the biochemistry internally of what's actually happening there, and then a couple of the cleanses that we use here in the office. It just depends on what's actually going on though with that gallbladder to be able to figure out exactly what needs to be given. So symptoms is. Actually, I should back up. Let me start with actually function first. So function, the gallbladder actually sits below the bottom of the right rib cage. It actually is it sits on top of the liver. And so if you actually push into that right rib cage, that's right about the area that it sits in, that abdominal area, the upper abdomen. Its function is the liver actually creates what's called bile, and it puts it into the gallbladder. The gallbladder is what actually concentrates the bile down, and it acts as a valve and a release mechanism to release bile into the small intestines. It does it by way of the bile duct. And the purpose of the bile is in part to actually digest fats, and 2, it is part of the detoxification process of the body. The liver does use that as a means of getting rid of certain things. And so both purposes are super important. We're gonna go into a little bit of that later. But so what ends up happening is when people consume a meal or food, based on the fat content of that, the gallbladder actually knows how much bile it needs to actually release to match the amount of fat in the food that they consume, so that fat actually breaks down and you're able to then get all the positive benefits of digesting and eating fats. And this becomes even more crucial in our modern world, where a lot of the holistic doctors are talking really heavily about diets kind of like the keto diets that are real kind of more higher on the fat end and good fats. A lot of people now talk about, use olive oil, coconut oil, avocado oils, butters, like the importance of good fats. Absolutely, yes. Omega-3s, fish oils, cod liver oils, yes. You will not get the benefit out of those if your gallbladder is not working right, because you're not going to actually process that once they get into your intestinal tract. So that's like kind of its basic function and purpose. So when people start having issues with that, usually what's happening is one of three things. It can be as simple as like infection. So sometimes you will actually get infection in the gallbladder. 2, the bile will get too thick and it will actually not release properly. And then you can go all the way to gallstones, where that bile is actually sitting there so long that it actually starts to form little like pebble type things, stones. And then that's when it becomes a little bit more problematic. We want to catch it in infection. If there is a problem with it, we want there to not be a problem with it. But if you do have a problem with it, we want to catch it more in that either infection, inflamed, the thickening of the bile, those kind of stages, because your results will go a lot faster, much more likely you'll calm it down. Once you get to stones, it becomes much more complicated. So the symptoms of it though is the tall tale sign for me, and the way I picked up on it most of the time in practice, is actually, interesting enough, back pain, like kind of more upper back, like right in the middle, and then out into the shoulders. Right shoulder pain, if someone tells me like I just woke up and I have this really sharp right shoulder pain, or if they say I woke up and I can't hardly move my neck to the right or left, I'm immediately going to look for a gallbladder problem. So every organ in the body has a referral pattern. Probably the most commonly known one is the heart, because people will talk about like heart attack, left shoulder pain and intensity. Kidneys is another pretty common one. Kidney stones, people talk about how the low back gets really painful and wraps around. Gallbladder, its referral pattern is pretty much straight behind it into the spine and up into that right shoulder. And so it will tend to come on pretty almost what's perceived as instantly, meaning you'll kind of wake up with it or it'll just start coming on after you eat something. And then it'll also, people describe it as just this constant ache. Like they'll try to move away from it, shift this way, shift that way. The positioning doesn't seem to matter. And that's because the actual pain itself isn't coming from the spine, it's coming from the referral from the organ. And that's what'll do it. In the world of applied kinesiology, we do know that that organ correlates to what's called the popliteus muscle, which is actually found in the knee, and acts on the hinging and unhinging of the knee. So another sign that we sometimes see if people will come in and their initial symptom only will be that they're starting to have knee problems. They'll be like, yeah, both knees at the same time just started giving me a little bit of trouble. Same thing, I'm immediately looking for a gallbladder problem. Sometimes it's not there, sometimes it's just a knee issue, but that's what I'm immediately looking for because it will start to create those kinds of issues. Diagnostically, again, we use muscle tests like the popliteus to try to identify, is it a gallbladder issue? Medically, telltale sign of that is actually pain under that rib cage. So if you actually do apply, and you can actually even test that yourself, if you push in under that right rib cage, the upper abdominal on that right side, and you get any kind of pain or like particularly more on the sharp pains, then you are dealing with an issue there that's starting to be an issue. If you're not consciously aware of it, you're probably more in that, again, kind of getting too thick, infection, something more like that versus actual gallstones. But sometimes people can get away with gallstones for years and actually not have pain symptoms of it. So which is why actually we wanted to talk about this subject in particular, because how crucial it can actually be to address it on a regular basis. This is something that I myself even do check and do little like cleanses on, which we're going to talk about those cleanses. And this is because actually I myself started up with, I used to live in Argentina and I started having all these sharp pains and stuff that started here. It really affected when I ate. Like I'd wake up in the morning and eat and I just feel like sick, feel like I didn't want to eat foods, didn't want to eat solid foods. And took me forever to piece this whole thing together. It ended up being that I started having gallbladder issues back in my early 20s. And so it's something I have to kind of do a flush for on a pretty regular basis. But Dr. Gabe is going to go through some of the more important components of that gallbladder function, because I don't think we could probably emphasize enough how important it is that it is actually working and operating.
So one quick thing too, you may not actually have pain, and pain can be the latter part of it. So you may have been having gallbladder issues for a little while. But if you burp quite a bit when you're eating, especially in a fattier meal, that's one sign. Heaviness after eating a meal, if you feel heavy, and I watch a lot of like street food shows and stuff like that, and they talk about how heavy they feel after eating something like that. Well, you're not processing it properly. One of the other ones is you can get peeling of your skin on your hands and on your feet, and what that really is going with is a improper fat metabolism that's been impaired. Now, that is one of the main functions of bile. That is one thing that all doctors will talk about. So bile is an emulsifier. That's what really help with fat metabolism. So when it releases bile, the pancreas will release an enzyme too, lipase, that helps with the fat metabolism. But without it, like Dr. Quinn was saying, you're not going to really process your fat. Now, bile itself is made from cholesterol, and that's typically what with gallstones, if they were to break them apart, they're going to see cholesterol. And that's where they're like, oh, freak out, it's cholesterol, take a statin, we got to stop this. That's not really the case. You got to ask the question of why. It's not necessarily that your body's creating too much cholesterol in this instance. It could, but again, why is your body creating too much cholesterol? It's an inflammation, usually, as the root cause. So 50% of the cholesterol that you make each day goes into making bile. So that's a really important thing to remember. So if you don't have enough cholesterol, you're not going to make bile and you're not going to metabolize fats. The other thing is bile is green. When we look at a gallbladder, when you see it, of course, me and Dr. Quinn had to do a whole lot of fun anatomy and dissections and stuff. So the gallbladder itself is green. It's green because of copper. That's the reason why. Just like the Statue of Liberty looks all copper, I think it's made out of, if I remember correctly, and so when it oxidizes, it turns green. But either way, that is the reason of the color itself. It's pretty green. And so copper is going to come into a big play when we talk about the causation to gallbladder problems. The other thing that is often missed is insulin regulation. Apparently, a while back, they found that there are things that are very similar to beta cells with the gallbladder that help with insulin regulation. So that's another important factor we're going to talk about, insulin resistance. And if you have issues with insulin resistance, you're going to have issues with your gallbladder.
Okay. Right on. Yeah, and so all this comes together, and that's actually part of why it proves to be so important. So again, the purposes of fats in the body, so let's talk about that for a second. So as you digest fats and assimilate them, there's lots of purposes for healthy fats in the body. In fact, what we call the omega-3 fat to omega-6 ratio in the body helps to determine the inflammation levels in the body, and that's actually a pretty simple blood test that people can check. There's a lot of really good writings and work on that. Michael Pollan is a guy that has some great books on that. And the realization of the closer you can get to a 3 omega-6 to 1 omega-3 ratio, your inflammation levels will be dropped.
Omega-6 to omega-3. Omega-3 to omega-6.
Omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. Your inflammation levels will drop dramatically in the body. And so that's only going to be possible if you're actually assimilating the fats you're taking in. Fats make up the premise of all cells, like the wall around all cells. So the health of actually even at a cellular level is determined by fats. Fats are also the basis of what we call the myelin sheath, which surround all nerves, both in the brain and down the spinal cord. And so you have a crucial part there that if your fat ratio is getting off, you're going to start seeing more inflammation on a nerve level, and then you're going to be dealing with more things kind of like neuropathies and nerve-based pains.
The brain itself is made up majority of fat. That's another thing, not just the myelin sheath. So that's another important part. Fat is crucial everywhere. Cholesterol is crucial. Fat is out of your macronutrients, your protein, your fat, and your carbohydrates. Fat and protein are actually essential. Carbohydrates are the only ones that aren't necessarily essential as much as these other two. That's an important part. And then fat-soluble vitamins, that's another big one. So vitamin A, D, E, and K.
Yes.
You got to have vitamin A, well known for eyesight, we think. Eat your carrots, which is just a terrible thing because you're not really making a whole lot of vitamin A from carrots. Mainly you're going to get it from liver and animal products. Butter and things like that. But vitamin A not only helps with that, it's very crucial in your immune system and in your gut. Vitamin D, which is often just looked at as a hormone in itself, it's made from cholesterol. Without cholesterol, you're not going to make vitamin D. We always think, oh, the sunlight, just go out in the sun. Well, the sun just doesn't give you vitamin D. You actually make it from cholesterol. The other things that you make from cholesterol too are all your steroid hormones. So that's your reproductive hormones, as well as some of the other like cortisone and other hormones there too. And then coenzyme Q10 or CoQ10. There we go. But CoQ10, very, very important antioxidant in your heart and very, very crucial in your energy metabolism. Without it, it's just not going to function.
Yep. And then, so then all the hormones, you have different brain hormones. So again, the crucial component of why fats need to be taken in and assimilated properly. The other side of it too, I mentioned it earlier, was the detoxification side. So they're realizing more and more how much actually the liver uses the gallbladder and then releases into the small intestines. And then there's certain things that actually just continue all the way out through the digestive tract. In particular, estrogens and some of your estrogen-like compounds, which we see a really heavy dose of nowadays, especially with all the plastics and those kind of things that people's levels of these compounds are higher, and so that's the way, the avenue the body gets rid of it. So to go into the actual cleanses or the things that we do here with people and in the office. So once we identify that as an issue, there's a couple different herbs that I've used throughout this time, and that I got taught from the doctors that taught me, and I've seen them do really, really well with people. One of them in particular is called Boldo. The company I use for that is called Forest Center Herbs. It's actually a liquid tincture. It looks like a bottle just like this. And the purpose of Boldo is it will, or what they found that it does is it will actually loosen or release the bile duct. It'll actually allow it to dilate to make it easier for the bile itself that's going from the gallbladder to actually make its way into the small intestines. And so I actually will have people do this, usually about 10 to 15 drops of it before each meal of the day in order to prep the body as it's pushing it out. Because if you don't have fats coming in, the gallbladder is not being signaled to actually compress to push the bile out to the small intestines. So you do it before a meal, so that way it preps that duct, and then the fat coming into the body sends a signal for the gallbladder to actually compress, and it makes it easier for it to push out and push through. So that is one herb that I use very, very regularly. Another one that we use is from a company called Supreme Nutrition. The product's name itself is called Bodyguard, and it's an herb that you find out of Brazil, and there's a lot of studies out of Brazil on this particular herb. It's used actually really heavily with any kind of liver detoxification or clearing, but it's one of the few herbs they found will actually help to break up the stones themselves, which is actually pretty fantastic. And so usually I'll start people on both of those together, so that you actually start to get some of that process. If there is something like a stone in there, you're starting to break it down, and you're helping to open that bile duct to make it easier for things to actually pass through and go through. You can use things like lemon juice is a common thing I've heard people talk about, and sometimes I will put that in there. So you fresh squeeze lemon, squeeze it in half, squeeze it into water, drink it down. People do that first thing in the morning, and that too will kind of help in that inflammation levels around the bile duct or the exiting of the bile to the small intestines. Dietarily wise, all fried food has to come out. All fried food has to come out. So you're being concerned about the amount of fats coming in, and whether or not the gallbladder can actually keep up with it. So what we're looking at is trying to remove high fat content, at least for a period of time, while you actually do that cleansing process. And so all fried foods come out. Unfortunately, another one that tops that list, even though it's a fantastic food for people, is actually eggs. And you see this most when people are having a real active problem. So if they actually are getting a lot of pains down here, really concerned about what's going on, we want to cut anything back that's going to really force the gallbladder to compress too hard. And so what you're trying to do is cut back those really high fat foods, start them on the herbs, and then just kind of a more normal diet and a normal fat level will get it to start working, so that it's kind of compressing a little bit at a time, and you're starting to get stuff to release a little bit at a time and not trying to force it all at once. So fried foods, eggs, dairy ends up following next on that list. And then while it's not a fat content, but gluten has been I consistently see it as something that tends to add to that inflammation level and irritate there. So it's not necessarily that it's causing it to contract, but just that it's an irritant to the gallbladder itself. And so that actually makes up kind of the basic system or protocol a little bit. Through the applied kinesiology and testing, we can sometimes identify if there's a more specific thing that needs to be happening. That's more on the fat, like digestion side. So if that's the issue at hand, then that's the system we go through, and that's a little bit more kind of set in stone, meaning it's pretty much what I'll use across the board. And then and on the detoxification side, it can get a little bit more complicated. So we don't have a particularly set system for the detoxification side, but if we're able to identify that it's more of estrogen issue and not passing estrogens, then there's certain things you'll give for that. So it kind of just depends on what is going on that side, what it is that we'll give.
So I want to just make a couple of points. One in particular is just healthy fats. For a long time, canola oil has been touted as a healthy fat, also known as rapeseed oil, corn oil. I mean, all these fats that we typically use all the time. They're just not really where we need to be eating. Now, if you've been following us or if you're in the natural health world, you've probably been already using coconut oil, avocado oil, or extra virgin olive oil. And you know, with extra virgin olive oil, not to really cook with it, can't handle high heat. Palm oil is another good one. Butter. I always talk about butter, grass-fed butter. It's awesome. I love grass-fed butter. So that's an important part. If you have a bunch of these refined plant-based oils that I mentioned earlier, that take a long time to actually process and turn it into what we use it for, they're just highly inflammatory. So stay away from those. Insulin resistance on the whole other side, that's going to cause a problem. So if you're eating too much refined carbohydrate, just cut that out. Like, cut it out. Eat, as Michael Pollan, who he already mentioned, eat real foods. Plant-based mainly, but obviously you need to have the animal products. You have to have meat from high-quality animals and things like that. But of course, we're going to recommend certain things during the process. If you're having a really extreme gallbladder attack at a certain period, we might recommend different things. But we want you to be able to process fats. Now, on the estrogen side of things, if that is the issue, and it is very, very common in our society to have estrogen dominance, we got to cut out certain other things. Soy is one of the biggest ones. It's a phytoestrogen. It acts as estrogen in your body. It's going to cause problems. Pesticides, they're known as xenoestrogens. So again, they act as estrogen in your body. So we always recommend organic, local, if you can. Plastics, they come from the similar things as like petroleum products and things like that. They also act like xenoestrogens. And in addition to that, going back to the insulin resistance, you get this whole issue where you can make more estrogen in your body, and it becomes a horrible cyclical cycle, of course, cycle of issue. One of the other things I want to touch on is birth control. So if you're taking birth control, it's going to cause problems. You're already adding a hormone in that's causing problems to begin with. IUDs are among some of the most terrible ones that are out there, and especially the copper-based ones. We mentioned copper earlier. If you have the copper-based one, you're going to have more issues with copper and the bile, and causing problems with it, making bile and the gallbladder itself. Now, there is a ratio and a relation with estrogen and copper. So if you have more estrogen, you're likely going to have more copper, and that's going to cause further problems. Caffeine, that's another big one. We like caffeine all over the world. We drink it a lot. People go to Starbucks almost every day or some other one. It can also cause problems to your gallbladder. So we may remove that if you're taking it. And it doesn't matter if it's taking too much or too little. It's very individual. It could be just 1 ounce of chocolate, and that drives your gallbladder over. Alcohol is another big one, and it kind of goes down the whole aldehyde pathway where people are having issues with smells and perfumes. But alcohol is a stress too, not only your liver, but also your gallbladder. And then the last one I want to mention is aspartame and what we call neuroexcitotoxins. Aspartame and MSG, food dyes, there's a lot of just neuroexcitotoxins that are out there, but they can cause gallbladder issues as well. Mm-hmm. So we'll be checking for those, and we have to remove them, whatever works. I mean, it's hard. There's a long list of things that we got to look for, but that's what we're here for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. And the caffeine is one that hits home to me. I happen to like chocolate. I think most people do like chocolate. But like I mentioned earlier, kind of one of the things in my own health history is a gallbladder issue. And so things work fine, work well. If I do hit too much chocolate, I'll immediately start feeling it in terms of how it affects my digestion. And that's the link, that's the connection. It will kind of slow things down. That's another common symptom, mentioned that earlier, but another common symptom of gallbladder issues is kind of constipation. And sometimes people even go from constipation to loose stools because it's really just the body releasing everything at one time, and then it kind of backs it up again. Bile, again, from that gallbladder is crucial for the whole digestive process and setting the right stage of pH throughout the intestinal tract. And so if it's not being released enough, there's issues that arise. So I don't know if there's any specific questions that people might have. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. If anyone does have a question, please throw it up there. Otherwise, we'll be kind of winding down. Like I said, next week we're actually going to be hitting on adrenal fatigue, which is another really kind of interesting topic, especially looking at people's energy levels, how much energy they have throughout the day, how they're feeling throughout the day, and the different components that affect that, and how to actually nutritionally support that. Yeah, so if we don't have any other questions, then like always, please feel free to send us something if you'd love to hear us talk about a particular topic. We would love to go over it in a Facebook Live or even in one of our health talks we do on a regular basis.
Which, speaking of that, we got one coming up on the 29th, July 29th. We just scheduled it, and we'll be on migraines.
Yes.
Fun old migraines. That's something personal to me. So.
Migraines, yeah. Cool. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you again next week.